Welcome to Crimson Clues, where shadows hide secrets and silence reveals the truth. Every story is a puzzle, and every clue takes you closer to the answer. Subscribe now, join the hunt, and let the mystery begin. Chapter 1, Interrogation at the Quai des Azuni. Your name, Captain Arthur Hastings, I said. Ah no, replied the man across the table, tapping his fountain pen on a small file. Un nom de profession. Arthur Hastings, formerly of His Majesty's. Look here, is it necessary? When a man is discovered with blood on his cuff, everything is required, stated the other officer more casually. He wore good boots and was the heir to a man who distrusted all cufflinks. Inspector Marchand will ask the inquiries. I'm Kaiser Verrier. Inspector Marchand tilted his head. New comrades. You arrived in Nice when? Yesterday afternoon. I'm on holiday. With whom? Myself, I said. And then, remembering the Riviera's proclivity to create scandal from nothing, I added, wholly myself. Oh, the pen scratched. Nonetheless, Captain Hastings, you were spotted last night dining at Le Fer with Monsieur Ronald Vale. I met him at the hotel, I explained, by chance. Marchand happened to repeat himself by chance. A man arrives alone and is immediately in risk of being well known. What do you know about Vale? I exclaimed. An American with money and an unfortunate cravat. He said he acquired racing tips. I paused, and people collects, people murmured. Verrier, says Biande. He spoke with everyone, I persisted. Waiters, fishmonger, and a woman with a Pomeranian. He would have dined with Napoleon if the man had come down from the hill. Did you owe Mr. Vale money? Marshall inquired. Certainly not. Does he owe you money? I don't. I started furiously and stopped. He pressed a note on me to pay the bill. I told him it was unnecessary. He laughed and remarked, everything's necessary when you're making friends on the Riviera. If you've arrested me for accepting the price of 2 soul muners, I'll call the British consul and calm down, Verrier remarked. We detained you because Msou had died. The words shook me like a sudden tsunami. Dead. Marchand stated that just after midnight, struck with a heavy decanter, there was broken glass, signs of a struggle, and a handkerchief with your initials on the terrace. I just stared. No, that cannot be right. Marchand corrected your initial and embroidered a H in blue. The maid claims you went to Vale this evening. I did, I admit. He invited me up for a whiskey after supper. He explained, well, he had a pitch to make to me, which was to introduce me to individuals. Give me 3 nights, he replied, and you'll return to London with half the Riviera in your pocket. I told him I didn't want the Riviera in my pocket, and if I did, I'd ask a friend who knows more about pockets than anyone alive. Your friend's name? I paused. I was damned if I was going to draw Poirot into a strictly social matter. Yet. I said, Hercule Poirot. Verrier's eyebrows rose. Ah, le fameux Belge. Marshall's pen came to a standstill. You know him personally. Intimately, I said, with more fire than was necessary. We were colleagues. That is intriguing, Marshall said, but it's less intriguing than the blood on your cuff. I looked down. The brownish mark stiffened the linen's edge. I must have brushed it against something, I admitted faintly. Verrier suggested hitting Mr. Vale in the head. I cried, and good Lord, no. He wasn't dead when I left. Describe your departure. I arrived at 11 a.m., I announced. We drank a whiskey on the terrace. He became discreet. He talked about a woman. He asked if I was a sportsman. I told him I preferred cricket over roulette. He laughed, then became serious and asked me to take a note to someone at the casino. I refused. I don't go about playing Mercury for strangers. He became offended. We quarreled lightly. I put my hand to the terrace rail, tore my cuff on a nail. Marchand held up a hand. The mark is not a tear. It is a stain. I don't know how it came there. Did Vale bleed while you were present? Verrier asked. I didn't notice any. Oh, wait. His hand. He cut his thumb on the decanter when he poured. He swore Americans swear in such inventive ways, and dabbed at it with a handkerchief. He asked if I had another, as his was embroidered with the wrong initials for the lady he was expecting. Lady? Marchand's pen scratched again. Which lady? I don't know. He only said you'll know her when you see her. Everybody knows her. Verrier exchanged a glance with Marchand. Tremont, continue. I refused to stay, I said. He insisted I finish my drink. I did, reluctantly, and left by the balcony stairs because he said the corridor was crowded. He had an odd way of speaking, you know. Everything was a stage direction. You left by the exterior staircase at what time? 10, 11, perhaps 20 at most. And then I walked, I said, along the promenade. There was a breeze. I dislike sea breezes. They always feel as if someone is snatching at one's hat. But I walked. Then I returned to my hotel and went to bed. Alone? Marchand's tone was politely venomous. Alone, I said stiffly. Verdier shuffled papers. At 12:15, the night porter at the Hotel de Palmier heard a crash. At 12:20, a woman in a fox stole hurried from the lift to the street. At 12:30, the valet discovered missile on the floor. The balcony door was open. There were footprints. One pair of English shoes. He glanced at my feet. Size 10, 9.5, I said. It was a ridiculous protest, but I clung to it. Marchand's pen scratched briskly. He noted every word, but I had the uneasy sense that he was arranging the facts, not as I gave them, but as he wished them to appear. His moustache was clipped as neatly as his handwriting, and I thought him a trifle too exact for comfort. Marchand leaned in. Captain Hastings, the valet says he saw you entering by the terrace earlier. I told you so. Entering, Marchand repeated. At 11:50, that's impossible, the valet insists. Then he's mistaken. I said possibly, Marchand said. But there is the handkerchief. There is the stain. There is also a letter. A letter? Marchand drew out a single sheet in a cheap envelope. Captain H, bring the money or the photograph goes to the press. It was in Vale's pocketbook. I brought no money, I cried. And in any case, what photograph that, said Verrier, is what we would like you to tell us. I can't tell you something I don't know. Marchand folded his hands. Let us examine motive. Did you quarrel about a woman? We did not about money. No, about a photograph. How could we quarrel about a photograph I'd never heard of? Marshall sighed. Then let us examine opportunity. You had access by the balcony. You left no signature in the register. You knew Vale would be alone. He said he expected a lady, I protested. And yet she did not remain, Verrier said. Possibly because the interview was terminated. I felt heat rise in my face. You cannot believe that we do not believe, said Marchand. We assemble. The door opened. A uniformed sergeant spoke in rapid French. Verdier's head tilted. Marchand listened, then rose. Quoi? I demanded. Your friend, said Verrier. He is in the waiting room. He has the mustaches of a general and the patience of a saint. He says he has come to take you home. Poirot, I cried. Marchand raised a hand. Not yet, Dermin. The door closed again. We three sat and looked at one another. I felt absurdly as if I were playing cards for ridiculous stakes, with no idea of the rules. All right, I said at last. What do you want me to say? The truth, Marchand said. I have given it. Verdier regarded me with his cool eyes. Truth is like the Mediterranean, Captain. Very clear until one goes out a little way. And then, zoot, the depth is surprising. We can settle the depth later, I said doggedly. May I speak to my friend? In a moment, said Marchand. First, one last question. This woman, everybody knows her. You have no idea who she is. None. Would you know her if you saw her? If everybody knows her, I said, I suppose I should. Marchand smiled without mirth. Bong, Sergeant, bring in the witness. The door opened again, and a perfume, powdery, expensive, precisely inclined to make a man feel he had underdressed, floated in before its owner. She was tall, dark, and wore a fox stole that might have paid a regiment's salaries. Her eyes were the sort that make one wish to apologize for existing. Madam, said Verrier, rising, merci venue, as she entered. I thought I caught the faintest shift from Marin. His pen, which had been moving briskly across his notes, hesitated a fraction too long, and he lowered his gaze with almost military precision. It was nothing. And yet it struck me that the inspector, usually so impassive, was suddenly intent on the buttons of his file rather than the woman across the room. She glanced at me and then at the file on the table, and allowed her red mouth the ghost of a smile. So this is the Englishman. This is Captain Hastings, Marchand said. Do you recognize him? She tilted her head. I have seen him, she murmured. Last night at Le Fair he was with Ronnie. Ronnie, I repeated. You knew Vale. Everyone knew Ronnie, she said with a little shiver of boredom. He was always entertaining until he became dull. He did, however, occasionally resurface as fascinating. Madame, Marron said, were you at the Hotel de Palmier at midnight? her gaze fixed on him like a moth on a lamp. "Inspector, I'm frequently at hotels at midnight. It's the Riviera. My hubby prefers his cards in a circle. I like to have conversations elsewhere. We have made an arrangement." Martian's lips contracted almost slightly before he hunched over his notes. "Were you at Monsieur Vale's suite?" She laughed. "The police always want specifics. It's terribly tiring," Ferdier replied gently. "Madame Delicourt, a man has died." For the first time she appeared serious. "Yes," she replied, "and that is not funny at all. Have you seen this man?" "Marchand mentioned me after 11:30. She pondered the promenade, she said, walking as if his hat had upset him. "I informed you," I said. She said, "I'm alone," but she paused. But Marchand prompted. She gave a bored little shrug. "There was somebody else. Of course, there's always someone else." I couldn't see his face from the balcony behind the palm trees. "And you went up?" Verrier asked. I got up. Her eyes returned to mine. Ronnie enjoyed company. "I am excellent company," Marchand asked when you departed, and she grinned. "When do you leave a party? When does the music stop?" Her expression became very serious. It came to a sudden stop. "Did you see a photo?" Verrier asked. Her eyes fluttered. "You got it." "No," Maron replied. "Then I haven't seen it either," she added with a coolness that felt like a gloved slap. She raised her chin. Marchand's pen paused briefly above the paper. He then dismissed her with a nod. The door closed. Her fragrance remained like an accusation. "Captain," Marchand gently stated, "you will remain in custody." "Custody?" But the door opened for the third time, quickly and decisively, as if it had been polished from the inside. A little nicely dressed guy arrived, removed his hat with dignity and tilted his head. "Mess," murmured Hercule Poirot, entering the room with the perfect bow. "I'm sorry to intrude, but you have arrested my friend. And that is an action at once melodramatic, unsporting, and how do you say premature?" "Mero," Verrier said with unexpected admiration. "We were about to invite you inside." "Invitation or no," Poirot replied, "I'm in. I just arrived from Monte Carlo via rail in the morning. Imagine my surprise to find, before I'd even unpacked my Hastings, was already keeping the local police busy. Truly, Mona, you do not waste time." His gaze fell to my cuff. "Also, I beseech you, never use white linen on the Riviera. It's a magnet for disaster." Maron steepled his fingers. "Fioche pour, your friend's handkerchief was discovered near the spot. His cuff bears blood, and there is a message requesting a photograph with his initials on it." "C'est bien," said Poole, grinning. "Then it's simple. You need to find the lady, the photograph, and the person who is not Captain Hastings. I will help you accomplish so with economy and charm." Verdier smiled despite himself. "You are confident." "I am exact," Poirot stated. He sat, positioned his hat exactly, and folded his hands. "Begin at the beginning, if you please, but we will do it my way." "And your way is?" Marchand inquired. Poirot's eyes twinkled. "To listen to what is not said," he told me. "Now, mon ami, tell me exactly what you drank, what you heard, and what you didn't notice. The latter is the more crucial." I protested, saying I had told them everything. "Pah," Poirot replied. "You've told them everything an honest man thinks of. Now you have to tell me everything a killer would observe." "Very well," replied Marchand, settling back. "We're listening." Poe nodded. "Bon. And while we're listening, Commissaire, could you please ask a sergeant to grab 3 items from Monsieur's suite? The decanter, complete with stopper bits, the glass unscratched, and the maid who hesitates." Verdier rose. "What about the maid? Why her?" Poirot smiled as she explained that she had been asked to make much of the handkerchief with the single initial H. Too convenient. Nespar. True evidence does not demand attention, however misleading evidence does. High, it waves its tiny arms in the air. Chapter 2. The Lying Maid. The sergeant dashed away, leaving Poirot seated extremely straight, fingers clasped at the tips, eyes half closed, as if he was already seeing the scene. Marchand leaned over the table. "Mou, Poirot, you speak as if you already know the female is deceiving us." "Meet Natalon," said Poirot. "Lying is like wearing a borrowed hat. The fit is never quite ideal. Did you not notice, Moncton?" She spoke too rapidly, certainly, and confidently. "It smells like lies." Verdier frowned. "You gamble with shadows. The handkerchief is proof enough, evidence sufficient to fool the sight," Poirot muttered, "but not enough to fool the small grey cells." At that point, the sergeant reappeared, carrying the decanter wrapped in brown paper, a single whiskey glass, and trailing behind an agitated maid in a stiff black uniform. Her hands twisted in her apron as she was pushed to the chair opposite. "Voilà," Poirot remarked with a slight bow. "Now, mademoiselle, please pardon us. We merely ask for the truth." Marchand cleared his throat. "Claudine Germassy serves MC Vale at the Hôtel de Palmier." "Yes, monsieur. Tell us what you found after discovering the body." She darted terrified eyes around the room. There was broken glass on the carpet, the balcony was open, and the gentleman lay so quiet. "I summoned the porter right away." Poirot leaned forward with the handkerchief. "Yes, monsieur, by the chair in white with the initial H embroidered." "And what did you do?" Poirot inquired kindly. "I gave it to the inspector." Poirot's moustaches twitched without hesitation. The girl faltered. "Yes, monsieur. Madame D'Eaucourt said I had to. She stated the cops would see it, and that would make things easier. She gave me a small amount of money, monsieur, and instructed me to hand it up right away." Tia Poirot's eyes glittered. "So you obeyed. However, genuine evidence does not demand attention. Only bogus evidence cries as loudly. You see, commissaire, the handkerchief was not found. It was presented, albeit poorly." Marchand rapped the table. "Why would Madame Delicourt do this?" His query was harsh and almost ravenous. It hit me strangely at the moment. Why should the inspector appear more worried than the commissaire? The girl shook her head frantically. "I don't know, monsieur. I merely did what she said." Verrier waved her away impatiently, muttering instructions to the sergeant to keep her under surveillance. When the door closed again, the silence seemed heavy. Marchand answered unwillingly, and Abian said, "Poirot, your case dissolves like snow in the sun. The handkerchief is contaminated. The weapon is not what you thought, and your star witness is singing a different tune." Verdier's mouth tightened. "Even yet, your Captain Hastings is the last man to see Vale alive. His cuffs are stained. He admits to quarreling. He is not excused." Poirot tilted his head. "Commissaire, he is neither absolved nor condemned. You have suspicion rather than certainty. And suspicion is insufficient for the law, even in Nice." Marchand taps the file. "We could keep him on remand." "You could," Poirot said calmly. "However, the British consulate will be writing letters by tomorrow, and half of London's newspapers will be penning editorials the following day." "Is this the scandal you want?" Verrier shifted awkwardly. Poirot pressed on. "Captain Hastings is no vagabond. He is an officer, decorated and respected. He won't run. I, Hercule Poirot, promise you that he will remain in Nice and at your disposal until the truth is revealed. Allow him to be free under my custody." The two Frenchmen exchanged glances. Finally, Verdier slammed the file shut. "Trepan doesn't leave Nice. He responds to every summons. If he vanishes, Moreau, his blood will be on both your head and his cuff." Poirot bowed. "I assume responsibility." I cleared my throat, feeling overwhelmed. "What does that mean?" Pooh said, "Yes, Hastings," with a small smile. "For tonight, you sleep in a bed rather than a jail." Marchand pointed his finger at me. "But remember, Captain, that this is not freedom. If you are foolish enough, you can hang yourself with this rope." "Come, Hastings," Pooh said as he rose. "We'll leave our friends to their paperwork. Tomorrow we will triumph, and I guarantee you that the truth is beginning to shine through." Chapter 3. Lunch with Madame Delicourt. The hotel room sparkled like a confection in the noon light, its awnings striped and its terrace packed with hats of odd geometry. Pooh had obviously picked it for drama. "She would not resist," he said as we waited. "She, like Madame Delors, adorns the stage. And what is the Riviera if not a theatre?" "I wish you didn't sound so cheerful," I said sadly. "I am still under suspicion." Poirot patted my arm. "Mon ami, you are beneath my wing, and this is the stoutest umbrella in Nice." She arrived 10 minutes late. Despite the warmth, a fox stole about her shoulders, and her lips were a gorgeous scarlet curve. She sat in the other chair, beckoned a waiter, and ordered champagne. "Monsieur," she replied languidly, "how gallant of you to invite me. One almost forgets that you suggested I was a criminal yesterday." Poirot bowed. "Excuse me, madam. I never hint, I deduce." Her eyes fluttered. "So what have you deduced?" Poirot expressed his preference for oysters over honesty. "And you keep more than just pearls in your lovely box." She laughed softly and throatily. "Miura, you're a dangerous little man. Okay, let's play. You can ask and I will respond if I feel like it." Verrier and Marchand had surreptitiously joined us at an adjacent table, reminding us that this was more than just a social gathering. Poirot leaned in. Madame, we know you interfered with the evidence. You told the maid to make most of the handkerchief with the letter H. She raised the glass. Interfered? I call it aiding. Ronnie was disorganized in everything. His relationships, debts, and pals. If a young servant girl notices a remnant of linen, why not assist her in accurately describing it? Poirot's voice became sharper. Because it wasn't linen, madam. It was theatre. You wanted the police to see that and immediately think of Captain Hastings. Her smile tightened. Truth is a costly luxury. I prefer appearances. I burst out. So why pay the girl to lie? If you had nothing to worry. She cut me off with a sharp glare. Because, Captain, folks like you see patterns where none exist. A handkerchief is simply a handkerchief. The letter H could stand for anything. Hotel, health, and happiness. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Or Hastings. There was quiet. Madame Delicourt laid her glass down with meticulous care. Ronnie was a fool. He considered himself a collector of horses, ladies, and secrets. But he overreached. Overreached how? Martian called softly from his table. She ignored him and focused on Poirot. Suppose, monsieur, a man received an image that appeared innocent in one light but scandalous in another. Assume he brandished it like a flag before a lady who cherished her reputation. Is this a crime? Blackmail is always a crime, Pooh stated. Perhaps, but sometimes it's just a negotiation. Verrier arose from his seat. Madame, that's enough games. Have you killed Vale? She laughed again, but not warmly. No, I am not that vulgar. I left him at midnight, still very much alive. He poured me a final tumbler of whiskey from that ridiculously chipped decanter. When I arrived, he was smoking and whistling some terrible song. If anyone murdered him, it was afterward. Pooh looked her over carefully. Did you leave precisely at 12 p.m.? Perhaps 10 minutes elapsed. Why? Because at 12:15 the porter heard a smash, and at 12:20 a woman dressed as a fox doll was observed running out the elevator, her lips curled. A fox doll is not uncommon in Nice, monsieur. They are worn by half of the promenade, but few people wear it with your scent, Poirot explained gently. Still, I believe you when you claim Vale was alive when you left. For if you had dismissed him, madame, you would not have paid a maid to promote a handkerchief. You would have disguised yourself rather than spreading incorrect information. For once she appeared unsettled. So why accuse me at all? Because, Poirot continued softly, you know who killed him. You feared the path would come into contact with you, so you tried to deflect it toward Hastings. But the rope you cast for someone else may nonetheless tighten around your own neck. Her hands curled around her glass. I saw nothing. You saw everything. You passed him on the stairwell. Nespar, the person who came up after you, you know his name. Her gaze flickered to Verdier, then back. If I talk, I will be ruined. Poirot shook his head. No, madame. If you remain silent, you will be wrecked. The murderer will not spare you. Vale was risky. Yes, but the one who silenced him is even more deadly. She stared at him for a long time before rising abruptly. You play too well, monsieur. I suppose she swept away, foxtails trailing like smoke. Verrier mumbled. We should have held her. Poirot waved a finger. No, no. She is intelligent, but fear will untie her lips more quickly than threats. She is already calculating her own safety. She will soon tell us the name. I leaned forward, puzzled. Poirot, who was on the stairs? Who followed her? He offered me a slight smile. Ah, Hastings. If I told you right now, there would be no suspense. No, be patient. The murderer walks openly among us, but his footsteps are too loud. Marchand frowned. So you don't believe Captain Hastings hit Vale? Stated Poirot. If Hastings killed someone, he'd do so with a cricket bat and then apologize. I bristled. Really, Poirot? Excuse me, mon ami. It is simply to state, no, Hastings did not kill Vale. The handkerchief is a ruse, the cuff an accident, and the argument a coincidence. But the photograph is the key. Find it and we'll find the hand that struck. Verdier exhaled. Even if the photograph had faded, Poirot's mustaches glistened. Then we look for where it's gone. A snapshot resembles a bullet. Even when hidden, it leaves a mark. He rose, fixed his tie, and placed his hat precisely on his head. Come, Hastings, we will make a grand entrance. When I think about blackmail, I need the air of the sea. The salt always brings back memories of the tears that followed. Chapter 4. The Weight of Ashes. We returned to Hotel de Palmier. That afternoon, accompanied by Marin and Verrier. The suite still bore scars, with blood staining the carpet and glass fragments glinting like malicious gems. Poirot moved with exaggerated care, fingertips hovering above surfaces and nostrils twitching, as if he smelled shame rather than dust. "Messieurs," he said finally, "you have searched poorly. A bronze ashtray doesn't disappear into the Mediterranean like a penny in a fountain." "It is here," Verdier scowled. "We looked everywhere." "Everywhere but correctly," Poirot mumbled. "Hastings, raised the curtain." I did so, revealing only the balcony door. "Not that curtain," Poirot gently explained. "The other." I complied. Behind a second, stronger curtain, there was a recess for the radiator. Marchand gasped. There was a bronze lion-headed ashtray wedged beside it, half hidden, its edge dark with what I knew too well. Verrier grasped it with his handkerchief. "Blood," he murmured. "You were correct, Bianca," Poirot replied calmly. It struck a veil on the head. "After that, someone hurriedly and poorly hid it here," Marin frowned. "But who could have returned to the suite once we arrived?" Poirot's eyes glittered. "Ah, there's the wit. Maybe no one. Perhaps it was hidden before you arrived and simply overlooked, but I doubt it. The murderer thought you would find out, so he or she sneaked back in. A risky move, but desperation breeds brave thieves." Verrier mumbled. "It must be the maid again." Marchand leaned down over his notebook, avoiding Verdier's gaze. His pen moved with mechanical precision, but not, I imagined, very firmly. Poirot shakes his head. "No, she is timid and a follower. To re-enter a crime scene demands either authority or insolence. Our maid has neither." I cast an uneasy glance toward the policeman. "Do you mean someone among—" Poirot lifted his finger. "Patience, Hastings. Let us not accuse without order, but contemplate who may walk in and out of a hotel suite without being noticed. Not the visitors, but they are visible. Not the servants. They are being observed. But the police are always obeyed." Marchand hardened. "You recommend one of my men?" Poirot stretched his hands. "I have no suggestions. I simply take notice of possibilities." Verdier growled. "Insulting, non-commiser, stimulating. There is another explanation. The murderer may be a guest dressed as an authority figure, such as a man claiming to be Vale's buddy, or a woman who is used to controlling porters and waiters. They don't question such individuals." Marchand's eyes narrowed. "Madame d'Harcourt returns." Poirot tilted his head. "She has some authority, yeah, but I don't believe she has her hand on the lion. The blow was powerful, fast, and brutal. This is not her style. She prefers manipulation. Someone else delivered the hit." Verdier placed the ashtray on the table and stared at it sternly. "This alters everything. Hastings, do you deny touching it?" Of course I denied it, and I cried. Good gosh, I'd never seen it before. Poirot interacted smoothly. "Mesher, don't spend breath on Captain Hastings. His hands are too clumsy for such a specific hiding place. If he had done it, the ashtray would be lying on the street rather than neatly tucked behind a radiator." "Thank you, Poirot," I said, unsure whether to be flattered or offended. Marchand leaned forward. "Then who?" Poirot tapped his temples. "We must ask who feared the photograph most." "Yes, Madame Delicourt, but there are others as well." Vale was generous with his mischief. "He did not collect just one secret," I explained. "But we don't know what's in the shot." Poirot turned to face me. "Ah, Hastings, you always wish for the picture without the frame. But I'll tell you this. It showed a man whom he killed." Marchand pounced. "What man?" Poirot smiled. "That I have not yet spoken, but please think. Vale asked Hastings to deliver a note." "Why Hastings?" "Because Vale intended to use an innocent as a shield. He was blackmailing someone strong. He expected trouble. He hinted at it when he mentioned packed corridors. He knew there were eyes on him." At that point, the porter knocked timidly and entered. "Excuse me, monsieur, but there is a gentleman below looking for Captain Hastings." I blinked. "For me? Who?" "A tall Englishman. He identifies himself as Robert Henley." Poirot's head snapped up. "Henley." "Ah." Marshall grumbled as the initial H returned. "Another Englishman, convenient." Poirot rose. "Bring him up." At immediately. Moments later. Robert Henley entered tall, sunburnt, with the square shoulders of an officer and the casual swagger of a man who has never been refused credit. He bowed curtly. "Hastings, thought I heard you were here." Uncomfortable situation was resolved. "This Vale guy is getting himself killed." I stammered. "Henley, I haven't seen you since Boulogne." "What on earth?" Poirot cut across smoothly. "Mr. Henley, you knew Ronald Vale. I met him several times at the casino. If I recall well, Bounder attempted to offer me horse racing tips. I mostly avoided him." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Ah, but Vale didn't dodge you. He had your name. He wrote letters." Henley blushed. "Rubbish," Marchand pounced. "A note was discovered on the Vale demanding payment from Captain H. If not Hastings, consider Henley." Henley stiffened. "Preposterous. You cannot accuse a man with a letter." Poirot spoke gently. "However, you come here most conveniently on the day following the murder. You search out Hastings, whose name is so similar to yours. Perhaps you hoped he'd bear the burden. I came to see an old friend, and Henley barked. There's nothing more." Poirot folded his arms. "We will see. Messieurs, I believe monsieur, Henley must respond to numerous questions about photographs, handkerchiefs, and why he prowled the corridor of the Hôtel de Palmier last night." Henley's face darkened. "You cannot prove I was present." Poirot's moustaches gleamed. "Oh, we can. Someone noticed you, and soon, mon ami, the truth. It will weigh as much as this bronze lion." He motioned to the ashtray. Henley's eyes darted to it unintentionally, and that fleeting gaze warranted a confession. Poirot smiled. "That's enough for now, Mercy." Chapter 5. Henley explains himself. Henley stood straight as a bayonet, his cheeks flushed, his gaze shifting between Pouverier and me. He snapped, "I won't be bullied. If you have any queries, I will answer them, but I will not have my name tainted by Vale's muck." Poirot tilted his head. "Très bien, Mumsy. Why are you at the Hôtel de Palmier requesting Captain Hastings the morning after Vale is killed?" Henley took a breath. "Because I overheard Vale at the casino the night before." He was bragging like usual. He claimed he had Captain H dancing on a string. Someone decent and gullible. I immediately thought of Hastings. He's just the type of person Vale would use, friendly and unassuming. So I arrived because I was afraid he'd been duped into some nasty plan. I started, so that was it. "Did you come to warn me?" "Exactly," Henley replied quietly. "I didn't trust Vale, and I wouldn't see you using his brush." Verdier's lips curled. "A convenient tale." Henley's jaws constricted. "It happens to be true." Poirot tapped his fingertips together. "And still, Monsieur Vale dies before you can warn Hastings. Worse, you were seen along the corridor of his suite at midnight." Henley blushed. "Yes, I admitted it." I proceeded to face him. "Tell him not to use my or Hastings' names." But as I approached the door, I heard voices. A woman's voice. I didn't have the stomach to interrupt, so I turned back. Verrier pounced. "You agree you were outside the suite at the time of the crime. That alone may condemn you." Henley's fists tightened. "Blasted, dude. If I'd murdered him, I wouldn't be standing here today. I would be almost to Paris by now." Poirot's mustaches twitched. "Not necessarily. Some murderers remain at large, convinced that they are smarter than the police. Tell me, monsieur, why should Vale bring you up at all if you had nothing to fear?" Henley hesitated before bursting forth. "Because I gave him a racing tip about a horse at Longchamp 2 years ago. He lost a package on it, and ever since he loved to propagate the rumor that I owed him money. He had a knack for twisting things until they stank." Poirot nodded slowly. "So not a photograph, not a scandal, only a petty grudge inflated." Henley's shoulders sagged. "Yes, and I suspected he'd attempt to blame Hastings. That is why I came." Verdier's glance cut like a knife. "You admit being outside his door. You admit your grievance. And you expect us to believe you just slunk away?" Henley slapped his hand on the table. "Yes, because I was a coward in that time. When I heard a woman chuckle, I turned back. That's the entire of it." Pooh looked at him intently. Perhaps you hit and are now hiding behind honesty half-confessed." Henley's face stiffened. "If you believe that, then prove it. Otherwise, quit fooling with me." I broke in, piqued by Henley's obvious shame. For if Henley had intended murder, he would have denied being near the apartment entirely. A guilty man would not tell half the truth. Poirot suggested, or perhaps he tells a little truth to disguise a greater lie. Verdier slammed the file shut. "We should detain him. There is far too much coincidence. His name, his presence, and his quarrel." Henley's eyes flared. "You will not do such a thing." "I am innocent." Poirot raised a hand. "Messier shows restraint. Detaining Miss Henley now would be premature. The genuine murderer will simply smile at your error." Marchand frowned. Then you clear him. Poirot said quietly, I clear no one. But I do observe Mr. Henley is afraid of being embarrassed. Yes, he worries being used. But murder. No, he is irritable but not harsh. He plays cricket, not roulette. Henley exhaled deeply and stood up straight. So be it. Keep me under suspicion if necessary. However, please mark me. When the truth comes out, you will not be looking for me. Poirot grinned slightly. Ah, that is certain. But we'll see if you're the hunter or the hunted. We exited the suite in silence, Poirot walking with his hands clasped behind his back and humming under his breath. Well, I finally asked, do you believe him? Poirot tilted his head. Henley tells enough truth to be credible, but not entirely. This is why I let him walk. A guilty man would run. An innocent man will stay and watch. I, mon ami, shall keep an eye on him as well. I exhaled. Meanwhile, I remain Captain H's shadow. Poirot patted my arm. Courage, Hastings. The photograph will appear soon enough, revealing the hand that struck the curtain. Chapter 6. The Lion and the Handkerchief. Poirot stood before the table, where the lion-headed ashtray sparkled. The bronze beast caught the lamplight, its mane sparkling like fire. Madame Delure was poised but pale, and Henley was restless. Claudine twisted her apron. Verdier was stern, and Marron had his pen neatly put over his file as if nothing could disturb his calm. Poirot started gently, his voice measured and calm. The lion murdered Ronald Vale. One blow heavy and certain, but more than bronze. It was a ruse that almost condemned the innocent. The handkerchief with the letter H, conveniently placed next the deceased, was no accident. It was a lure. Madame Delicourt urged the maid to pass it over at once to ensure the police noticed. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair. Poirot said, but think about it, Mammy. If Madame Delicourt had drawn a veil, she would have completely concealed her presence. Instead, she manufactured a hint, casting suspicion on Captain Hastings. That was hardly the act of a murderer. It is the act of someone who is afraid the trail will lead her too close to someone she wants to protect. His gaze drifted slowly, finally resting on Marshall. Vale's letter sought payment from Captain H, not Hastings, not Henley. It was Captain Henri Marron. He feared exposure, while Madame Delicourt feared ruin alongside him. They moved suspicion elsewhere, but the ashtray revealed what the handkerchief did not. Who delivered the blow? Verrier stiffened. Pooh, what are you saying? Pooh's finger touched the ashtray. The firearm was hidden after the cops had arrived. Who alone could stroll into the sealed suite and place it behind the radiator? Unquestioned, a uniformed officer. Inspector Marin, Henley murmured. Good Lord. Madame Delicourt turned aside, her knuckles whitening around her glass. Poirot pressed on. The photo veil draped over you, Marin, was taken at the Villa Masquerade. It did not reveal a minor indiscretion. It depicted you and Madame Delicourt alone on the balcony, your face bowed close, her hand upon your cheek, lips nearly linked in a kiss. For some, nothing. However, it was disastrous for a married lady of position, as well as a rising officer whose future was dependent on her husband's support. Yes, people had already spoken of Madame Delicourt's late-night calls to pals in their hotel suites, but murmurs are smoke. The photograph depicted flames. A single image solidified rumors, and Vale was well aware of this. He only needed that frozen moment to ruin you both, and he reveled in the power it provided him. Mon's pen remained still, his voice calm, yet his mustache quivered. Speculation? No, Poirot insisted strongly. Details. You knew the decanter was chipped before anyone mentioned it. That betrayed your personal search. The maid discovered the envelope veil concealed beneath the ashtray stand. There was a photograph inside, and when I turned the lion earlier, your eyes shone with recognition. Martian, you've always been too exact and neat. Verrier rose, her face gray. Henry, tell me this isn't true. Marchand adjusted his handcuffs. At last he spoke slowly and almost gently. It is true that Vale threatened me. True, he had the photograph, and I did strike him. I would not want to see her or my name dragged through muck. Better he dies than the woman we damaged. Madame Delicourt's composure snapped. Her lips parted, but no words emerged. For the first time, color bloomed in her cheeks. Poirot tilted his head. So it wasn't just a fear of scandal. There was affection as well. Maybe love. However, when love and fear are mingled, the result is a hazardous wine. She looked away and whispered, We were careless. Marchand gave her a single look that said everything he couldn't say in front of witnesses. Then his shoulders straightened. Careless, definitely, but not cowardly. I will answer for it. Verdier's voice was rough. Henry Marron, you have been arrested for the murder of Ronald Vale. The gendarme moved forward. The snap of handcuffs echoed like a shutting book. Marchand did not resist. He only took one more look at Delacour. She sat motionless, her fox stole slack, tears sparkling but not shed. Poe shifted the ashtray so that the lion faced east, toward the faint hint of dawn peeking through the windows. There, Hastings, he replied gently. You're free. Only the truth endures. I swallowed hard, surprised that a single stitched initial could nearly undo me. Poe smiled. P.H. Hastings, you're too innocent for controversy. Even in a snapshot, you'd be facing the incorrect direction. Thank you very much, I replied dryly. He chuckled and rubbed my arm before offering me his. Come, mon ami, the Riviera is too brilliant to cast shadows. We'll take a walk along the water. And no oysters tonight, Hastings. They simply lead to scandal. Epilogue, the Riviera forgets. I have always thought the Riviera was an undesirable location for crime. Sunshine, bougainvillea, and promenade music do not naturally encourage murder. Yet there I was not a week ago, facing the prospect of being executed for one. Thanks to Poe, I can now walk the Promenade des Anglais without a gendarme at my elbow. But I must admit that the experience has made me cautious. When a waiter offers me a napkin, I carefully scrutinize it to ensure that no initials are embroidered on it. Henley shook my hand the day following Marchand's arrest and said something about damned awkward business. I believe he felt guilty for even suspecting me. But in my opinion, he brought most of his problems on himself by having the type of face that conjures up images of scandal. Madame Delacour remains in Nice. She wanders the terraces as if nothing had occurred, foxtails bobbing and daring anybody to whisper. Her defiance is wonderful in its own right, but one can't help but wonder if she looks for Marchand whenever the throng stirs. I will only say this about Marchand. He was a courageous soldier during the war and a brilliant officer thereafter. But pride and passion are hazardous friends. He struck the veil to defend not only his honor, but also a woman he cared deeply about. It cost him his freedom and almost took my own. I almost pity him. Almost. Poirot turned to me one evening as we watched the sun drop below the headland, his calm aggravating. You see, Hastings, it's always the small details. An initial, a rank, a glimpse at an ashtray. These serve as the foundation for the truth. I moaned about having enough initials to last a lifetime. He simply smiled and fixed his moustaches. Courage, mon ami. The sea wipes away scandals. And over time, even here in Nice, romance is remembered more fondly than murder. Music. And thus concludes Poirot and the Lion of the Riviera, a sun-bright mystery in which fox fur glamour, a bronze lion, and one inconvenient initial attempted to conceal the truth. In the end, smoke cleared, waves rolled on, and Poirot proved that even on the Côte d'Azur, looks cannot outshine evidence. If you've listened to the end, you're the reason these stories continue.